All right. So welcome. And please, thank you very much for attending the first of two Selwyn Rain Ready Action Program workshops. The Township of Selwyn and GreenUP have partnered to offer sustainable, low-impact landscaping solutions to prepare for flooding and drought. And please stay tuned for workshop number 2 that will focus on drought tolerance, and that will be sometime the end of summer, early fall. All right. So just some introductions here. My name is Anna Courier and I work for Selwyn Township as their climate change coordinator. And joined today we have Heather Ray from GreenUP. Heather is the director, yeah, you can see Heather there, the director of programs at GreenUP, a certified rain garden designer since 2016. Heather has been with GreenUP for over 6 years and has led a number of education and action programs in the Peterborough area focused on green infrastructure, water, and neighborhood action planning. So we're very lucky to have Heather with us today. We are also joined by Haley Goodchild, programs coordinator at GreenUP, and Haley's programs include Deep Paved Paradise and Ready for Rain. And we'll be giving you some details about a Deep Paved Paradise project happening in Selwyn Township later on in this presentation. Okay, I'm going to hand it over to Heather. If you'd like to share your screen, Heather, I'll stop my share.
Great. Thank you. Just one moment and we'll have many screens going. Let's get the right screen here. Here we go. Is that, everyone see that okay? Mm-hmm. Perfect. Awesome. Thank you so much for that kind introduction, Anna. It's really great to be able to work with the Township of Selwyn and help to expand some of the work that we've been doing and bring some of what we've been learning about to Selwyn. I went to high school in Lakefield, so it's kind of nice to kind of feel back at home, so to say. So today we're going to learn a little bit about how we can mitigate flooding and why things like a rain garden is such a valuable tool to have in helping against overrain. So some of the water concerns that we see in the area, things that we've heard include climate change bringing more and more extreme weather patterns, which is resulting, in moments of flood, as we were talking about before we got going here today. We had flooding in the region in 2002, and then a big flood event in 2004. But there's been ongoing issues with isolated flooding in different neighborhoods and different areas around the city of Peterborough and in the township of Selwyn as well. We've also been seeing a lot more drought these days as well. So in 2016, we had a level 2 conservation, which is a voluntary reduction in the amount of water being used due to drought in 2016, and also again last year as well. And it was actually one of the first times that everyone was kind of talking about whether or not we would actually see a level 3, and it was quite close there as well. So these patterns are not expected to go anywhere anytime soon. We're going to see more and more of that. Water quality has also been top of mind in conversation when it comes to water locally. We've seen more and more beach closures. There's conversations about microplastics and just general water quality. And the one thing that kind of brings all of this together when we talk about water is rain or the lack thereof rain. And over the last week, we have seen quite a lot of rain, which was needed, but there's impacts that happen to all of us when it rains. Rain goes across our hard surfaces, which you'll hear more about when it comes to projects we do like Deep Pave, where we want to remove more of that asphalt and put in green space to help not flow toxins into the water and to help keep our properties like a sponge, is kind of how I like to say that. So we'll learn a little more about that. So what is the solution to all of these floods? We're going to talk about drought in an upcoming workshop, but today we're going to talk about what happens when there's a little bit too much rain or a lot too much rain, and that generally does become a problem in the spring. And our friends at Green Communities Canada have 3 really unique and easy to remember slogans to tell yourself and how you can positively impact water. So the first is to slow water down. The second is to soak water up. And the third is to keep it clean. So when we talk about wanting to slow down water, there's things we can do such as installing rain barrels. And that just helps give, when the rain comes down really fast and hard, kind of gives it somewhere to land and store, and then allow it to trickle slowly back into our systems. When we talk about soaking it up, that's kind of this idea of a sponge, of wanting our properties to be able to kind of take that water and have it go back into its natural water cycle, have it go into the ground instead of washing across our properties and making it, our neighbor's problem, for example. And the third is keep it clean. We want to make sure that we are, picking up contaminants or picking up our dog waste, that we're not leaving oil residues around our property that can wash away and go into the water. Even though when it rains, the majority of the water goes into the storm drain system, that storm drain system is not treated. So that water goes as it is right into our local waterways. So the good news, and what we're here to kind of share with everyone today, is that the solution that can encapsulate all three of those slow it down, soak it up, and keep it clean mottos are plants. Plants are kind of this new old wave of the future in terms of helping us manage water on our properties. Will landscaping solve all of our problems? No, most likely it won't, but it's a good first step that we can all easily take part in, I suppose. Accessibility is kind of the word I was thinking of there and stumbled. But it's an accessible form of management. You don't need to be an engineer. You don't need to put pipes in. You can, when it comes to drought, using less water and how to capture water and keep it clean, plants help do all of those things. And we're going to talk specifically about rain gardens today, because rain gardens is kind of a really known form of something fancy is called green infrastructure, which is basically, instead of having pipes, how can we use plants to play that same role? And so we're seeing this more and more in municipal policy. We're seeing it in Ontario, our policy statements for the province. So we're seeing this being something that larger municipalities are taking on. And so it's really exciting to see, municipalities and townships like Selwyn also kind of encourage this type of work. So what you're doing by planting is actually building a beautiful infrastructure to help your community. And what's great is that rain gardens do all three of these things all at once. So I want to take a moment to kind of take a little bit of a tour around your house. So feel free to get up and go grab a sheet of paper and a pencil. We'll take a few moments here for that. It's really important before you start thinking about a rain garden or landscaping in general that you kind of get a layout of what you currently have. And so feel free to just take a moment, grab a scrap piece of paper, back of an envelope, whatever you have laying around, marker, pencil, pen. And I want you to start drawing out your property, your house. On your house, do you know where your downspouts are? Maybe just draw them in. It doesn't have to be fancy. No one's going to see it. We're not going to ask you to hand it in at the end. So it can be like little stick people in the front if you want it to look at a little flower if you want. But mark out your driveway, maybe your pathways. If you have a sump pump, do you know where it outlets? Do you know where that hose comes out of your basement? Do you know roughly kind of how far your downspout comes out from your house? Doesn't have to be to scale, just roughly. And as people are sketching out and creating their kind of site design here of their property, feel free to use the chat at any time. If you have questions, pop them in. Haley and Anna are both kind of going to be overseeing the chat, and we will have time at the end for some Q&A. But if anything pops up, they can interrupt me at any time if it's kind of really pertinent to the conversation. And so to practice using that text box, if you have a personal story or an acknowledgement to how flood has impacted you, feel free to use the chat box to share that story. The chat is not recorded, so don't feel threatened by the chat box in any way. It's not going to be part of the recording if you're wanting to share something that you don't want to be shared later. So we'll give it just a few more moments to sketch out our design. So we have our house, maybe our roof. Is it really pitched? Is it a flat roof? What does that look like? Do you know where your downspouts are? Do you know maybe what part of your roof your downspout collects water from? We're sketching our driveway out. Maybe pay attention to what kind of material is on your driveway. Is it really compacted, kind of chipped gravel? Is it asphalt? Is it concrete?
So we do have a comment in the chat, not pressing, but wondering if anyone knows a good eaves trough cleaning service in Peterborough. So if anybody has any ideas, you can put them in the chat there.
Great community sharing. All right. So as folks are finishing up their sketch, I'm just going to move on to the next thing. So what I really encourage you to do, and it's been raining all week, and I was kind of hoping it would be raining today, as much as I really love the sunshine today. When it's raining is the best time to grab your umbrella and go outside and do a walk around your home. And what you're looking for are a few different things that I've outlined here on the screen. So this is from Green Communities Canada. On their website, Rain Communities. You can find this checklist, and we can share a link to that in a moment. But this is a bit of a rain-proofing checklist. So I just pulled a few things that make a lot of sense to me. So before you even start thinking about, should I put a rain garden in? What you should do is take a walk around and start thinking about, does the water run away from my house? Are things sloped away from my foundation? Does my driveway slope the water away? And just watch how that water moves. Check your eaves troughs. Good questions already about eaves trough cleaning. It's really important that your eaves troughs are cleaned. Otherwise, that water is going to back up and go over your eaves trough and right down into your foundation. And that's where we get that basement flooding. We don't want that. We also want to make sure our downspouts are far enough away from the foundation of our home. So if you just end your eaves trough right at the base of your home, that's actually just going to send the water right back down into your foundation. So you want to make sure it's at least 2.4 meters away from your foundation, or further. If you can make it go further, the better. Let's try not to send it into our neighbor's backyard, though. I have seen that happen a few times, and it doesn't allow for very positive living in a neighborhood when we're doing that. The other thing, you can walk right out to your street as well and take a look at where is your nearest storm drain, and especially this time of year in the fall, making sure that it is free of debris. So if there's leaves covering it, if maybe there's some garbage built up, just making sure that we're keeping that storm drain clear. Some communities have these really great adopted storm drain programs where, neighborhood associations get together and they're just kind of say, I'm going to be responsible for this storm drain. And it's a fun activity for kids to just keep the leaves off the storm drains. If you have a sewer backflow, which I know at the end, Anna's going to share some municipal resources for some of these type of things as well. But just take a look. If you have a sewer backflow, take a look at it. Sometimes they have to be cleaned at least, I think 6 months to a year, the valves. Or if you have a sump pump, maybe get it going, see if it's working okay. If your sump pump hasn't ran in a while, they can seize. So then when you really need it, they may not actually be working for you. So every now and then, just give those a good check. And then keep your basement free of absorbent materials. So treat your basement like a basement. And that way, if you do get water in your basement, it's not as big of a concern. So be careful what you put down there. Keep things raised, store from the ceiling if possible with brackets. So once you've done all that and you've walked around in your rubber boots and splashed in some puddles and had some fun as you're walking around your home, then we can start thinking about more of the outside. What are some more of those green solutions that we can offer? So as you're looking, look at those downspouts. You want to make sure that they're not squished, like this one image. If it's squished, the water's not going to come out of it, and it's just going to back up and again go up your eaves trough and over and into your foundation. If you notice your downspout might be connected, this is it could be one of two things. It could be that your rain is being connected to your O-pipe system and being drained away. If so, that's probably okay. But the other most likely option is that you're connected to, if you're in a more built up urban area, you may be connected to the sewer system, which is where our waste goes when we flush the toilet. And so that was an old planning model of wanting to connect water to that system so that the rain would just go away with that. Unfortunately, what that does now is when we get more and more heavy rain events, it's actually overflowing our infrastructure. So we want to leave that system for our wastewater and not for rain. So disconnect that if you can. And then think about, can I plant somewhere nearby that downspout? Is there a way for that water to be directed further away so that I can direct it to an existing garden? Is there space in my downspout to put a rain barrel? Rain barrels are amazing, and we think of them mostly during a drought because we think we want to store up as much rain as possible so that we can then water our plants when there's, no rain falling. And that's ideal. That's amazing. We don't want to use tap water for plants if we can help it. But rain barrels are also so great when it's flooding. When it's raining, you can leave your rain barrel tap open, attach your hose to it, and it just helps slow the water down. Let it capture a little bit and let it slowly let that water out the other end. Direct that hose to a tree or a garden you may already have, or plan out your new rain garden so that that water can be directed into your rain garden instead. That's just going to help a lot of solving a lot of erosion issues as well and overloading systems. And then when you're out walking around, think about contaminants that may be around your home. Where do you put your snow? Do you use a heavy amount of salt? Could you use a different kind of salt if you are thinking you may want to have a garden on your property and there's not a lot of other spots for it? What about dog waste? If you have a pet, have you thought about putting in a digester? A digester is wonderful. It's like a composter, but works from a different scientific breakdown, and they're actually buried underneath, and we're going to share some more info about those as well. But those are great for pet waste because you don't actually use that compost in your garden. You would want an above ground composter for that, but it's a great spot to put pet waste for sure so that it's not laying around. And the paved areas that you have, think about the slope of them. Are they sloping into your lawn? Is there a way to capture some of that so it can be sloped towards your gardens? If you do have paved surfaces, do you need to have the paved surfaces, or could we remove it? Could we use a permeable option instead? There's really great permeable pavers out on the market these days that you can use instead, porous concretes and things as well. Or can it just be sloped so that it's actually going towards a garden away from your foundation? So these are all things that we think about when we think of if a rain garden is right for our property. Just doing all of those things alone is actually going to do a lot to help protect your home and your neighbors' homes from flooding. It won't stop it completely, but that's what you can do to mitigate that surface runoff. What's important though is when you think about wanting to do a little bit more, rain gardens really come into play. They're really inexpensive compared to other kind of what we would call gray infrastructure or piping solutions. They're also really low maintenance because we're using a lot of native species and they don't need as much attention as some other species. They still need some love, but not as much. It also creates this beautiful shading effect, so it will help cool down your property in the winter, in the summer. It also creates a beautiful habitat and some biodiversity, some pollinator support in your yard as well. So more than just flooding prevention. So I just wanted to share this picture of these folks we recognized in Peterborough with one of our programs. And you can see in their backyard, they have a rain garden put in, and they have a rain barrel, and then their rain barrel kind of underground outlets into their rain garden. But what they've also done is put a lot of trees in. And so I just want to share the message that trees are also these beautiful little things that do all three of our slow it down, soak it up, and keep it clean water mottos. So trees' canopies help to slow down water. Their leaves like to capture the raindrops, and then it slowly trickles down. Their root systems soak up water. So if you have a wet spot around your yard, maybe a rain garden is not quite what you want to do, but think about whether planting a few trees there may be an option for you. And they also help to keep water clean. They absorb and filter. So before I get into the good stuff and tell you what a rain garden is, I wanted to just tell you what a rain garden is not. A rain garden is not a water garden. It is not a wetland or a pond. You're not going to keep koi fish in it. It's primarily going to be dry. So you want it to be dry, except for after a heavy rain, it might hold water for up to maybe 2 days. It's kind of the most you want it to hold water. You do not want it right up against your foundation. You want it to be 10 feet away from your foundation and your neighbor's foundations too. You don't want to line it with plastic. You want everything to be nice and gradient underneath. You want the water to go down. That's the goal. So you don't want to sculpt it and have it where it's taking water just away and taking it to a storm drain. You want to, again, create a sponge outside so that the water that falls is your water, your responsibility if it falls where you steward the land, and you want to hold that water in as much as possible. So what is a rain garden? A rain garden can be just like any other garden, except it does have kind of one really important functional process to it. So I want to start at that functional process. So if we break it all apart to its foundation, what it looks like essentially is that you have a bowl shape of a garden that can be dug down into a bowl, or it can be built up into a bowl. You also want to make sure that you have an inlet and an outlet. So those three main components. It's in the bowl shape so that it holds water in. You have a designated area where water is coming in. So that could be from where you've located your downspouts, could be from those paved surfaces you've located. So is there enough room beside your driveway? Can you extend those downspouts into a nice area? You can put these in shade or sun. And the outlet, we'll learn a little bit more here soon about why an outlet is so important. But if you don't have an outlet, it's not a rain garden quite yet. So an outlet, just like in a bathtub, if you get too much rain coming in, you want to make sure you have somewhere safe for that to go so it doesn't start backing out towards, or in a bathtub sense, overflowing onto your floor. You don't want it to overflow into your basement. So this is a bit of a side profile of what I mean. So you're going to have water coming in from your downspout, let's say. It's going to hold into the little bowl for a couple days. And then if you get too much in your bowl, it's going to overflow on the other side, away from your home, probably towards a storm drain or a ditch. But a rain garden isn't a rain garden, isn't a rain garden. They all don't need to look the same. In fact, it can be this beautiful palette of your own artistic expression when it comes to what plants and what colors and kind of the shape you want it to have. So you will see around Peterborough that a lot of our rain gardens have rocks in the middle. So GreenUP, we've put in quite a few rain gardens as demonstration sites around town just to show people what they can look like. And we do seem to always put rock in the middle. Some rain gardens really want to have that because you want to get the water from your downspout to really come through your rain garden if you have a bigger one especially. But sometimes you don't actually need it. Sometimes we actually put it in for more of an aesthetic preference. Some people just like the look of it. And it also just says, hey, says I'm a rain garden. This is what I am. Pay attention to me. So you'll see it, but it's not always needed. You can see that there's some rain gardens, and we've put some in around Peterborough that take water in off the road. So if you have, for example, a driveway, yours might look more like that, where there isn't a downspout coming in, but there's just maybe a flat surface where that water is running in from. Or they can look very much close to the home. This one picture in the top right with that beautiful little sedge is actually far away from the home. That's a front porch that you're looking at there. So it's not actually close to a foundation, but you'll see that it's coming off of a downspout as its water inlet source. All right. So is a rain garden needed? Is that what you want? Well, sometimes what that depends on is if you have the space for it. So how big should you make it? Is a little square enough? That all depends on how much water you have that needs to be captured. So in your drawing, pay attention to where is your property end and how much space you have in between. And I do want to say that any little bit does count. So if you can't make a garden that captures all of your water, even if you capture a little bit of your water and then let the rest go, that still makes a difference when we kind of add it all together. But unfortunately, there is some math involved, which I'm the first to say that I don't like to do projects that have a lot of math in them, but there is some math. So what you want to do is look for where your water is pooling. That is probably the ideal spot. If you have a spongy, wet spot in your yard, that's most likely a great spot to put a rain garden. Then we need to do some math to figure out how quickly does the water get through your soil. So it's called an infiltration test. It sounds more complicated than it is. Basically, what you're going to do is in that area where you think you want to put a rain garden, you have some wet spots there, you think that's a good spot, dig a hole, get your hole wet. Once that water goes away, you're just going to stick a ruler in it and mark it. It could be a stick. It doesn't even have to be a ruler. Find a stick from the ground in the back of your property and just stick it in the hole and mark it with a bit of a Sharpie or a pencil, and then fill it up to that line. And what you're going to do is wait an hour and see if that water disappears within that hour. You can see we have a little bit of a hole there filled with water. And the idea is that when it rains, you want your rain garden to absorb that water within those 2 days mark. If you fill your hole up with water and that water after an hour is still there and it hasn't moved at all, you most likely have clay somewhere in your foot of your hole. So if you live somewhere where there's a big amount of clay and you have a thick clay gradient in your soil, a rain garden's probably not the right choice for you because it's going to take too long to absorb a lot of that water. But luckily, in the township of Selwyn, there's lots of beautiful loam. So you're probably going to be okay. So this is where I've simplified some of the math for you. So what you want to do is kind of, when you're walking around your house and you've drawn out your downspouts, that's when it's really important to know what part of your roof is coming into each downspout. Traditionally, a home will have 4 downspouts, and the roof is traditionally split into 4 different parts. But all homes are not the same. So your home is going to be specific for that. And so what you're going to do is pay attention to that total roof area. You may have to use Google. Sometimes Google Maps is great because you can just see your roof from the sky and just measure it out right away if you don't know your home dimensions. And then you're going to divide that by 10. And that's the ideal rain garden size. So how wide you want it to be. But then because it's a bowl, we also have to go deep. So we want to think about how much our water infiltrated into the soil. And that will really be the depth. So ideally, you don't want your depth to be more than 12 inches or a foot. On average, most rain gardens that we build are about 6 inches. If you have a tree close by, make sure you draw your trees out in your picture. Because if you do have a tree close by, you don't want to go down very deep. And so we don't want to disturb their root systems. So that's where you can get really fun and have a flat bottom. And then you can actually just berm up the sides. So if you can't go down, you can create your depth by just bringing your sides up. If you're like me and math is just makes no sense, a really good rule of thumb that we have found, and there's research from the University of Alberta that's suggesting that an average rain garden is about a quarter of the size of the surface area of water with a 6 to 12 inch depth. So if you have half of your roof going into your rain garden, it's going to be about a quarter of that size is the size of your rain garden that you want it to be, and that should capture it all. But don't worry, if you muck up the math and make your rain garden completely the wrong size, it is all going to be okay because you have put in an overflow outlet. So it's okay. So you just make sure that you design that in, make sure you don't forget it, and that it's going away from your foundation towards the road. So you can see in this picture, this is one where we dug down a little bit, but because of tree roots, we also burned up the sides. So we actually used the sod that we stripped off the top of this yard and used that sod to help make our berms. So it's a really good tip to save some money and resources. And what we then did is just ensure that we cut our berm so that we had an outlet going through that berm, so the water, if it got too high, would then overflow into that hole instead of going over our berms. So once you have the kind of structural bit of your rain garden done and planned and thought out, you can get into some more of the fun, colorful stuff. This is where you get to use your creativity. You don't have to do so much math, and you get to choose your plants that you want to put in your rain garden. Maybe you do want to put a tree in your rain garden. We've done that and that looks beautiful. You can definitely put a tree in your rain garden. Again, make sure that it's 10 feet away from your foundation. We recommend using the native soil that you have on hand. So maybe you have dug some of that out and you may want to mix that with compost and put some of that back in to plant your plants into. If you have pulled out soil that perhaps you don't want to reuse, we recommend using a sandy soil and just cut that, mix it in a little compost in there as well. And then as you're ordering your supplies before you're ready to plant, I recommend that you order some mulch. Mulch, as we'll learn in our fall workshop, is an imperative part of a garden to ensure that water stays in the garden, that it doesn't over evaporate. When you newly plant a garden, mulch is really important as well. You can think about using ground covers instead of mulch, so things that are going to spread and stay nice and low to help keep that moisture in. But when you first put in a garden, mulch is going to be your best friend. In this case of a rain garden, you actually need a special kind of mulch. So it's not super hard to find. What you're looking for is a heavier mulch. So you're looking for a hardwood or something that's double shredded, so it looks more like a nest material than really chunks of bark. And that's because once our garden gets filled with water, the chunks of bark will float and they'll actually float with the water, clog up your overflow, and you just don't want that mess. So use a nice hardwood mulch or something that's shredded and looks like a nest material, and that will stay put for you. So this is where we recommend, when you're kind of thinking about what plants you might want to plant, is to think about using native species. And I have a diagram in here that just shows you the root systems of some popular native species. So in here, you might not be able to see it. J on the far right is prairie cordgrass. Grasses are beautiful in a rain garden. I right beside it is white false indigo. There's some showy sunflower, Indian grass, black-eyed Susans, little blue stems. There's some purple coneflower. All of these species are perfect for rain gardens because of those long root systems. So the idea is that the water is going to be absorbed not only through the soil, but by those root systems, and that those roots are actually what's pulling your water down into the underwater table. And that's really what you want. So if you're using little roots, for example, like some sod or some clover, that's just not going to do it. You're going to want those big roots in there. You can visit our ecology park on Ashburnham, 1899 Ashburnham. It'll be open hopefully after the long weekend in May. And it's all native species brought in from 100 kilometers. So you can find many of these native species that I'm mentioning here today. And then what I recommend is that you select species for the sun exposure and the soil type. First and foremost. So if you are planting in a loam, it's very rich, try to pick plants that are good for that richness. If you're planting in a very sandy, try to pick plants that are good for the sandy. And of course, if you're rain garden, so you can try to pay attention throughout the day on your design. Maybe put your design up next to a window. Just tape it on the wall. Your house that you've just drawn out. Just tape it up by a window. Look out your window in the morning. Kind of mark out where the shade is, and then look out in the afternoon and mark out where the shade is. And that will really tell you then where you're planning to put your garden, what kind of shade coverage you're going to have throughout the day. You can definitely put some shade loving species in here. I have planted a couple of rain gardens in the shade and they look wonderful. On the outside, you can see this image I have here of these 3 rings. So that inner blue ring is actually what's going to have the most water sitting on it for the most period of time. But remember, these gardens aren't wet all the time. So you're actually going to want to put drought sensitive plants in here. That inner ring is great for grasses, sedges. They love being right in that middle center of your rain garden, right at that flattest. And then as you move out, you can get more shrubs in there if you'd like, or you can get even on the outer ring. Maybe you have some flowers or some plants somewhere else on your property that you want to move over. Maybe some lilies, hostas, anything like that is fine on the outside. Ooh. And then after you've planted your rain garden, and I wanted to share a tip. A tip is that you want to make sure your rain garden doesn't get compressed. So whenever I plant a garden, and I either use a board to stand on, you just don't want to stand in the garden too much. What you can also do, that was taught to me, is you can put your mulch down first, and then you can walk on it all you want, and then just plant in your mulch. And that way you don't have to worry about compressing all that beautiful fluffy soil that you've just created. And then as you water your newly planted rain garden, because it will need some water, of course, if it's not raining, think about the concept of being wise, water wise. So when you water, you want to make sure you're giving it a good amount of water, hopefully from your rain barrel, at the base of your plant for a good long time, because you want to encourage those roots to go deep and straight down so that it helps to carry that water down. So you don't have to water them every day. Water it less frequently, but with more water right at the base of each of those plants that you've just put in, and that will help your rain garden be more effective further down the road. Inches, you want to make sure you have 2 to 3 inches of mulch, that double shredded mulch we talked about, put down. And then you also want to make sure you've selected some, like I said, drought tolerant native species, but also clump them together. So great trick for later when you want to save some water and not have to overwater your rain garden is to kind of put your species that need similar watering together. So if you were using black-eyed Susans, don't put one at the back and one at the front and one at the side. Put them all together in one little section, and that way they get the same water in one section. And then think about expanding your rain garden, or think about, is there a garden you already have that you can actually expand into a rain garden so that you don't have to start from scratch. So now with your design and you have your home, you have your downspouts, kind of know where your roof is and where your laneway are, and maybe you have a bit of an idea of where you might want to put that rain garden, and you can start now dreaming about what that's going to look like, what colors and what plants. And so now when it rains, you can feel confident that you're ready for that rain, that your eaves drafts are clean, your downspouts are working, your yard is a sponge, and you're being nice to everyone else around you and not giving them your water. So that was a lot all at once. We went over quite a lot. So if you're still thirsty for more, there's more opportunities to learn. So the city of Peterborough has a rain garden subsidy program, and Haley and I will be doing workshops in the spring and the fall, and everyone is welcome to attend. So we'll go through more step-by-step how to plant a rain garden, more specifics of what species you might want to choose. So even if you're not in the city of Peterborough, you're in Selwyn Township, you're more than welcome to join us so you can learn more. And then Anna's going to tell us a bit more about the subsidies for the barrels, rain barrels, and a really cool garden kit as well that you can get from us. And in case you're a really good green thumb and you want to learn more and help tell your neighbors all about it, Green Communities Canada, our friends there, are offering a rain garden masterclass online. Thank you for listening to me. I would love to answer any questions that anyone may have now.
Thank you so much, Heather. That was really awesome. Really help us to understand how our home and property really works as a system. And those are some really helpful, digestible tips and tricks that sort of demystified something that I've sort of been a bit intimidated by. So rain gardens themselves. So yeah, that was really awesome.
Right. Yeah, no, water is a beautiful entity that we don't need to be afraid of. We want to keep her close as much as possible.
It's a resource. Mm-hmm. Well, if anybody wants to submit a question in the chat, they can. We can always follow up with questions after the fact.
Yeah, there's no silly question. So anything at all. Haley is also here. Haley is also a certified rain garden master who can also help answer anything as well.
So we have a question in the chat here. What is best to put right next to the foundation to prevent flooding?
Great question. So the best thing to prevent flooding at your basement is just to get the water away from it. So just make sure that your eaves troughs are working, they're not leaking, your downspouts are at least 2.4 meters away, and that you don't have anything right up against the foundation that's wicking the moisture down into it. So some people do use, there's some contractors that do put in some plastic barriers and things like that, but you shouldn't need it. If your flooding is coming from surface water, then it should be able to not go in your basement if you have it sloped away and you have the water at least, like I explained, in the downspouts going away. If you've done all that and you're still getting water in your basement, then you might need to call some different folks to help you out because it might be some groundwater. That's actually the issue. Mm-hmm. And Haley's going to actually put in our Sustainable Urban Neighborhoods Landscaping guide that gives you a lot of different kind of tips and tricks all written out for different kinds of gardens. So there's a digital copy and there Haley just put it in there. So there's a PDF there that you're welcome to.
It's a super helpful resource. We also have another question. Can you recommend any affordable alternatives to mulch or how to source mulch locally? Great question.
You can, in terms of sourcing local mulch, you can call a lot of arborists who usually have a lot of extra wood chips around that they're willing to give you. You may have to take a big look, like a big truck worth of it, but we've been lucky to get some from those local companies in the past. When it comes to alternatives to mulch, I really fully believe in the use of ground covers. So if you can plant, sedums. Haley, do you want to jump in with some other ground covers that that you've used in the past?
So there are a few, and they'll differ in terms of how much water they'd like. So whether or not they truly want to be, if you were doing a rain garden, right in the center or not. But In my experience, wild strawberry, which is a native species, spreads and fills in pretty well. Some things will still come up through it a little bit, but it works really effectively. And then lots of sedges. So there are all kinds of sedges around the world. Not all of them are native. A lot of the ones you'll find in conventional nurseries are actually cultivars and varieties from Japanese sedges, but we do have some native ones in Ontario that do a great job of sort of mimicking, they almost look like lawn, not quite. They're a little more like voluptuous looking, but they look like grasses. They're not grasses, but they'll fill in as well. They're not quite as fast as wild strawberry to fill in. So those are our two options.
Another favorite, Haley, I know we've used it in the past, is yarrow.
Yeah.
Yarrow can get really thick and carpet-like, and that's a good. And creeping thyme as well is also a beautiful one, and it smells delicious. Thanks, Haley. So that's what I would recommend. I know some folks have used different kinds of mulches. They've used straw or leaves. I don't recommend using leaves unless you were able to kind of mulch them yourself first. So if you're able to put them in a pile and run your lawnmower over them quite a few hundred times, then you can maybe use, then that is actually a really suitable alternative. But if you use whole leaves, they'll just bunch over each other, and then the water actually won't get down in when it does rain.
Actually, on that topic, Heather and Haley, I'd love it if you could share what it is that, what the benefits are of leaving your leaves, because that is something we try to promote to our residents, that it is good for your lawn, and it helps keep it out of the landfill. So could you speak to that just a bit?
Yeah, Haley, do you want to mention that Haley was actually on TV not too long ago talking about this exact topic?
Sure, yeah. So leaving your leaves, good to leave your leaves. It's a good thing. So first of all, in the fall, leave your leaves because they offer really important cover for all different kinds of organisms. Lots of insects, pollinators, native pollinators in particular, rely on leaf litter in like garden spaces, but also on lawns. In order to survive the winter. So first step is leave them over the winter. And then in the spring, when you are, so a lot of people will feel compelled to start cleaning up their leaves. And depending on where they are, it may make sense to do some of that, but it's good to wait ideally until temperatures are consistently above 10 degrees Celsius for about a week or so. Usually in our region, that is not going to be until early to mid-May. This year is proving a little different so far. That said, we are going to be getting freezing temperatures this week. So it's ideal to wait to rake up and clean up some of that leaf litter on places where you don't want it, which might include, for instance, lawns, to wait until early May. But as much as possible, if you don't mind the aesthetic of it, it's good to actually leave it in your gardens, and it can function a little bit like mulch over time. So you can cut back dead stalks and just sort of chop them up into small pieces and just let them drop right where they are. If you have really, really thick piles of leaves, like let's say you have a garden underneath a big like oak tree or maple, then you may find that it gets a little too thick and it does start to actually prevent plants from growing. Then you might need to pull them out and shred them and put some back, or whatever, or remove some of them just because they're a little too thick. But I'd say more often than not, that's not the case. Yeah, and a lot of people, so lots of things that, benefits that you get from leaving some of that, like from having a messier looking garden and yard, so to speak, is not just for the health of various pollinators, but actually for your own enjoyment. So a lot of people, talk, nostalgic sort of thoughts about like fireflies and different things like that, but don't realize that the habitat that helps promote things like fireflies are in fact piles of brush and leaves and all those sorts of things that are sitting there in your gardens and don't need to be cleaned up entirely or rapidly in the season. So does that answer a little bit? And Heather, you may have additional things to add.
That's great. Thank you. Thanks for helping with that.
Just because we're close to 4 o'clock here, I'm just going to get one more question and then I'll wrap up. But no worries if people have to skip out. But we'll just be just a couple minutes over time. So follow-up question from Amelia: is it okay to have small flower gardens next to the foundation, or is it better to have substrate, for example, gravel, soil, or sod? And also some tips on how to grade away from the home.
Yeah, I can't. It says, are there landscaping companies that you recommend? So I'll go maybe backwards on this question. I can't recommend any landscaping companies directly, but I do recommend calling around and chatting with a few different folks to see what they have to say. But when it comes to grading, you just want to make sure you're grading your slope at least 10% away from, it doesn't have to be a steep slope. You just want at least a 10% gradient that's running away from your foundation. But I would chat with some contractors about that, because I'm definitely not an engineer, so I don't want to misguide you that way. But when it comes to plants or having a garden against your foundation, you totally can have a garden against your foundation. You're going to want to probably have ones that are low, non-native. You're going to want to have things with less root structure, so it's not burning water down. You're going to want to have things that you don't need to water very much. You don't want them to be saturated. So just nothing that's really encouraging water to hang out at your foundation would be my recommendation.
That's great. Thank you so much. If there are any other questions, we can monitor the chat and take note of them, or you can email me and then we can sort of follow up afterwards. But I think I'm just going to share my screen just to wrap things up. Is that okay with everybody? Okay. All right. Whoops. All right. So yeah, just to stay on theme here with some tips and resources, just some reminders to residents in Selwyn Township. We do have a sump pump inspection program to ensure that you're appropriately connected to a drainage system and not the sanitary sewage system. And as well, just see something in the chat here. All right. Oh gosh, there we go. Also, what not to flush. Just remember that our wastewater treatment equipment is designed for toilet paper and human waste only. Fats, oils, greases, feminine hygiene products, and wipes of any kind should never be flushed or poured down the drain. Even if a wipe says that it is flushable, it is not. As well, some watering restrictions. We do ask that folks observe lawn and gardening restrictions in order to ensure there's enough water for everybody. And for private water systems, so you're not on municipal services, there are a few resources: a well disinfection tool, a well records map, and blue-green algae information. So you can go to the Selwyn Township website. There's water, it's just water, Selwyn Township, or wastewater. So we have 2 pages for both. Yeah, all right. So just some more details about the Selwyn Rain Ready Action Program. We are offering subsidies. So in partnership with GreenUP, rain barrels, they can be purchased from the GreenUP store in Peterborough, and rain barrels come complete. And correct me if I'm wrong on these specs here, Heather and Haley, but they do come complete with a brass spigot overflow valve with 5 feet of drainage hose and a double screw top lid. So currently you have to do online ordering with curbside pickup, and in the next week or so, there will be subsidy forms. You do have to complete a short subsidy form just to sort of prove you live in the township, and you'll get $50 off a rain barrel, or a waterways garden starter kit. These are picked up from Ecology Park in Peterborough. So the rain barrels and garden starter kits are picked up from different locations. Got to remember that. And the kits include 17 different plants, 7 different species that are all ready to plant. And people can pre-order these from May 1st to May 31st, and they'll be ready to be picked up from June 10th to the 20th. So that the fall pre-sale window will be announced, but for now, that spring pre-sale window is May 1st to the 31st and pick up June 10th to the 20th. And also that's a $50 subsidy. So it's a pretty great deal. I really encourage you to take advantage of it. And hopefully this workshop has helped you sort of understand the value of those things and how to utilize them most effectively. But yeah, stay tuned. There are information on our website, the Rain Ready Action Program, that will give you links to those subsidy forms. All right, we've done our Q&A. So just so a few more details here. You can just Google Rain Ready Action Program, Selwyn Township. That'll take you straight to the page with information. Some of you might have visited our Green Initiatives page. All of our sort of green initiatives are listed there, including Rain Ready. As well, there is a Deep Pave Paradise project in the works for Winchfield Shores Harbor in Lakefield. Do one of you, Heather or Haley, want to speak to that quickly?
Sure. Haley's going to be running the on-the-ground coordination from here out. So Haley, do you want to share the great news?
Sure, yeah, thank you. So Deep Pave Paradise is a project of Green Communities Canada, and GreenUP is a local delivery agent for that program around here. And what it is essentially removing asphalt or pavement from underused spaces in different urban communities and adding new green space that on the one hand is really functional in the ways that Heather was describing in today's workshop. It helps slow that water down and soak it up and keep it clean, but can also have many other benefits. So some deep paves, create pollinator spaces. Some deep paves are rain gardens, all those sorts of things. So we're really excited to be partnering up with Winfield Shores in Lakefield. It's going to be GreenUP's first, I believe so, Heather, correct me if I'm wrong, GreenUP's first deep pave outside of the city of Peterborough boundaries. So
Great.
That'll be lots of fun. It usually involves the community. With COVID, these things are a little more difficult, but historically it includes volunteers coming out and helping to literally rip out the asphalt and plant the gardens. So hopefully we'll be able to do something like that on a sort of modified basis. We're hoping for June. We don't have dates yet, but I'm sure there will be more information to come. And if we are able to have people safely out on site helping out, then it'll be a great opportunity to sort of put into practice and learn in a little more hands-on fashion some of the things that we're talking about today. So looking forward to it.
Awesome. Thank you very much, Haley. Yeah. All right. So just lastly, we are going to do a random draw of participants for some cool prizes, which are so our first place will be you can choose a digester or a backyard composter. Now the digesters Heather spoke to briefly, but that's what it looks like in the bottom there. It's sort of dug down, and Hillary, who's on this call, can attest to that they can be a bit challenging to install, but also pretty straightforward. Hillary did, almost 30 last summer, so it just has to go about 6 inches into the ground, but dug down, really deep in the middle. You can get some big muscles doing that. So they're really great for all food waste. You just, you can put anything in it, and anaerobic digestion breaks it down. Or a composter. So those are those cool prizes as well. Our runner-ups will get a kitchen catcher or a blue bin, whatever you prefer. As well, everybody gets boxes of clear bags because, as we know, Selwyn Township is transitioning to a clear bag program for garbage. Actually, all townships in the county will have transitioned as of September, and we have lots of clear bags to give out. So I will be following up with everybody about that. Thank you so much again to Heather and Haley from GreenUP. It's been a pleasure working with you on this, and look forward to the next workshop, and hope people take advantage of those subsidies because there's lots to go around. And thank you so much to everybody for
And
coming.
let us know, reach out to us and let us know how your landscaping goes for you.
Totally. That's great that you're all right. So thanks very much. And yeah, for everybody coming out on this beautiful sunny Sunday afternoon for taking this time. Really appreciate it.